All right, welcome back to Principal Outdoors YouTube channel, the basics of bass fishing, and this is going to be part two of lures, or maybe part three. But anyways, now we're in the mid depth, so this is the probably where you're going to fish the most. Mid depth lures, funnest to fish. That's when you're finding active fish, and a great way to search for fish. So there's so many different lures that work in the mid depth. So I'm going to narrow it down to what my favorites are, what I use the most, what I'll always have tied on. You'll always see in my boat. Things that just flat out catch fish and are very actually easy to fish. So the first one I'm going to talk about is a senko type bait. So senkos were created by, and I think we have to give due to the man who created it, who's Gary Yamamoto. And they were created, oh my God, it's got to be, oh, it's over 10 years ago. It's a long time ago. And it's probably the most revolutionary bait that hit the market ever. And the easiest to use, I'd say. So one thing about them is, let's see, sorry about that, but here, let's take a look here. So this actually, that's an actual senko right there, okay? And like I said, they're so easy to use. Really, you just cast these out and you let them sink slowly, right? And that's why it's kind of a mid-depth. You could fish them deep if you want, and sometimes they hit it as soon as it hits the surface. So, but they're so simple to fish. You just cast it out, and because of the way it's constructed, the way it's made, it'll actually wiggle. The two ends will wiggle. I'm trying to get the two ends to wiggle, but the two ends will wiggle because the way you hook it is, all you need is a very simple hook like that. So that's an actual, it's actually a drop shot hook, but all you need is a little hook like that. You can use a worm hook, any kind of hook, and you just hook it right through the middle like that, right through, and you actually leave the hook exposed like that. So there you go. That's a senko right there. And all you do is cast it out and let it sink, and it's going to wiggle on its way down, and bass really can't refuse it. It's the weirdest thing. Like it was so revolutionary when it came out, but so easy to fish. Here's a different model. That's a flick shake from Jackal, and I use these a lot as well. They work very, very well too. You can see that the tail on the right there is just kind of curved. So, but it's the same idea. It has the same action, you know. So you can fish that on spinning gear or bait cast gear. They're actually pretty heavy, so easy to cast because they're so loaded with salt in the plastic. So you can fish them on spinning or bait cast. You can fish them on mono or fluorocarbon or braid. Anything, you know, it works any way you want, whatever you're more comfortable with. No snap, just tie directly to your hook. And if you want to fish a bit deeper, there are hooks like this that have a little lead head on it. I'm pretty sure this is tungsten. And it's got a little tungsten head on it, and that'll sink a little faster, but you don't want it to sink too fast. The action is in it slowly following and wiggling like that. So you don't ever want it to fish too fast. Like I wouldn't use this with the weighted head unless I wanted to fish in 15 feet of water or something like that, or deeper, or say 12 to 15. Otherwise, always weightless, right? So that's the senko right there. Just, you know, you can start with those. The easiest thing to catch bass, smallmouth, largemouth, doesn't matter. It just flat out really catches them. One of my other favorite ones there, that's the General from Power Bait. And Power Bait's really good. They've got like massive scent in the bait. It actually smells horrible. I won't even open up the package, right? But they've got a lot of scent in them, and fish hold on very, very long to those. So, but like I said, any kind of senko type bait will work for sure. The next one I would like, let's call it my second favorite, and we're gonna kind of group these together. So that would be swim jigs and vibrating jigs. So these, you'll see a lot of professional fishermen use them in tournaments. I see it all the time. It's been around for a long time. And I'll just tell you what the difference is. So that's a swim jig right there. Okay. So it's basically, if you've ever seen a flipping jig, it's like a flipping jig, except it's designed more to swim. So the head on it is kind of flat like that, and it's more designed for a swimming action, right? And you'll actually pop a trailer on the back of this. So you'll take a little swim bait, which we'll talk about in a minute, a little swim bait like that, and you actually thread it onto the hook. I'll actually do one up for you here. Wish I had my glasses, but we'll thread that onto the hook like that. And the good one usually has a keeper like that, so you get it nice and straight. And there you go. So that is to imitate a minnow in the water. This thing up here is a keeper or guard. Keep keep your trailer on. So that's a swim bait. Sorry, that's a swim jig. A vibrating jig, same idea, but it's got this blade on the front of it. Okay. So I put these in the same category because it's the same idea. You'll put a trailer on this as well, and you'll kind of fish them the same way. And before I forget, I'll say the difference is if the water's stained and really out of color and fish are having trouble seeing because it's stained, then I would use a vibrating jig because it makes a lot of vibration in the water, a lot of noise, so it's easier for them to find in stained water. A swim jig for clear water, open water. Like I've caught big largemouth and clear water on swim jigs like this, fishing them on rocky points and stuff. So that's the basic breakdown, but still sometimes in clear water, a lot of times I'll use a vibrating jig because sometimes you just got to aggravate the fish, and sometimes they just need something to trigger a strike. So you need something a little more aggressive, and then I'll use a vibrating jig. That's the same idea. That's a vibrating jig from striking called Pure Poison. There's a lot out of there. Freedom Tackle makes a great bunch of jigs as well, vibrating jigs and swim jigs as well. So yeah, colors, again, same thing. I'll use the light one I've been showing you, and then I'll use a perch color for where I'm fishing. That's pretty much the two colors I'll use. I have variations. I'm trying a new set of swim jigs from a new company and called All Terrain Jigs, and I really like the design on them with that keeper on it as well. So I know I'm going to catch a bunch of fish on those as well. So yeah, basic colors, whether it's a vibrating jig or a swim jig, just a light color and a dark color. You're good with two colors. You're better off to buy, if you're going to buy 4 swim jigs, you're better off to buy 2 in a light color and the same 2 in the dark color. Because if you do get a big fish on one, but then lose it, at least you've got a second one to back up. So I always try to, if I'm going to buy a lure, I buy at least 2 of them. And that way I always have a backup if it works. And then if it works, I can buy more. If it doesn't work, I haven't invested too much. Okay. Fishing swim jigs and vibrating jigs. I kind of prefer always a bait caster for sure, because you're going to use heavier line. You could use 17-pound mono or fluoro. I kind of prefer to use braid. It just seems that I've missed some fish when I'm using fluorocarbon, when I'm not using braid. So usually I will use braid on a swim jig. I will use a snap on it. Again, one of these little snaps. And this goes against what all the pros say, but I would use a snap on that just to get extra vibration out of it. And you could change it easily. And like I said, a bass is not going to see that snap and turn away from it. So don't worry about that. So yeah, try to use it on braid and try to use your medium heavy. So you're dealing with a single hook, so you can use your medium heavy rods on that one. Okay. So that's a swim bait. That's a swim jig and vibrating jig. Those are really good for mid depths. Depending on the weight, you could fish them, anywhere from 2 feet all the way down to 10 feet. There's some heavy swim jigs out there that you can fish deeper, but I'm usually fishing them in, 2 to 10 feet, and in 10 feet of water, they'll go down. I'll let it go down about 6 feet, 8 feet, and then the fish can see it from below and come up and hit it. I think my absolute favorite mid-depth lure is a swim bait. So swim baits are basically these. It's like the trailer that I showed you, all the way up to, this size. So this actually isn't the biggest. That's a 4.8, right? Or here's 3 different sizes right here. I don't think I can hold them all up, but there you go. Let's try that. So there you've got a 3.8. Yep, 3.8. So that I'll use for trailers for jigs and stuff. And I'll also use it on its own. I'll show you that in a sec. There's a 4.8, a bit bigger. This is good for springtime for largemouth. And then a 5.8 summertime when the bait fish are bigger, the bass are bigger, I'll use the big one, right? So these are called swim baits. And the way you rig them is simply on a jig head, just like that, okay? Now you can throw this anywhere. I mean, a small one like this is like maybe a quarter ounce. You could, I would fish that on spinning tackle. I would fish it maybe braid, but you could use fluoro as well. It'll work either one on your spinning gear. And I will just throw this everywhere, and you'll catch everything. You'll catch walleye. You'll catch all kinds of fish on it, right? I do that sometimes. These are the jig heads that I prefer, Nishine smelt head. Reason why I prefer them is because they swim absolutely straight in the water. It's very important that this looks very natural. You're trying to imitate a minnow with this, right? So you need it to look very, very natural. And one of the few jig heads on there that actually swim perfectly straight is a Nishine jig head. You can actually tie this and hold it over the side of in the water, and it'll sit perfectly horizontal like that. Just perfectly horizontal like that. Therefore, it swims perfectly straight as well. So that's very important. So I'll use light ones for fishing shallow water. When I want, my absolute favorite thing is to fish them in deep water. So then I'll go up to this size. This is like a little more than, it's a 5/8 ounce, so a little more than a half ounce head. And I'll put the 4.8 or the 5.8 on this. And I will fish this deep for largemouth and often get smallmouth. I love throwing this over weed beds and 15, 18 feet of water and just taking the top of the weeds and fishing it slow, just slowly fishing it above the weeds, suspended in that mid depth. And the largemouth will just crush it. And again, I'm bringing this up to you guys because this is so easy to fish. You just cast it out, just reel it in. You can pause and give it a little jerk and pause and everything, just quickly pause. Same thing with vibrating jigs and swim jigs. You can impart action to them, but most of the time you can just cast them out and just reel them in and they'll work fine as well. Here's a little modification I did on one of the Nishine jig heads. So I took a Nishine blade on it and hung it off the bottom of it, and this will actually create extra action in the water. And I got that idea. I didn't invent it. There's jig heads. I believe that's a striking jig head. Has the blade on it as well. Sometimes I like having that little extra action. But yeah, those are swim baits, right? Cast them out, reel them in. The bigger ones, the big half ounces I showed you, you're going to use those on bait casting. I prefer braid for that simply because I'm fishing open water and deeper water, and I want as long of a cast as possible, so I'll use braid, and I'll put a fluorocarbon leader on it. And I will use a snap with it as well for extra action and also just make it easier to quick change. And again, the bass are not going to see it. Swim baits, as far as color, I'll use a couple of light colors if I'm looking at light bait fish that I'm trying to imitate, right? And I'll also use dark colors. This is a pumpkin seed kind of. One of my favorite colors is this one right here. And these are Jackal swim baits. They're rhythm waves. Been using these for a long time. They actually last long, and they just have great action. See how thin the tail is. They have really, really good action in the water. And this is a good imitation of a perch. Where I fish, there's a lot of perch, so I'll use that color. I can't say I have a favorite color. Like one day this color works, one day that color works. I think kind of what it is. I don't even think they're that partial. I think, I catch that particular day I catch my first fish on this one, so I stay with it all day. Next day I go out, this one's not working, so then I switch to this, and then I catch fish and I keep using this all day. So I don't think they're too particular to color, and that's why you don't need 100 colors of these things. Again, 2, maybe 3 colors, and you'll be good. So those are swim baits. Again, very easy to use. I just started getting my jig heads organized. I'm trying to be more organized of an angler, so I'm using these clam boxes to organize my jig heads and get them all set up so they're easier to find. The one thing about swim jigs is occasionally, I love those Nishine heads. Occasionally I'm fishing in weeds, so then I'll actually go with a football jig head like that. So I'll put my swim bait on that, and it's called a football jig head because it's shaped like a football, wide like that. And the width of this will actually spread apart the weeds as it goes through. So this will be a little more weedless than that narrow head So I'll sometimes use this, a football head like this. And these you can get anywhere. They're homemade football heads. Every tackle store will have them. And I use these in deeper water, like again 20 feet or something, when I really want it to sink quick. So that's swim baits right there. We talked about rods, smaller ones on spinning, bigger ones on bait casting. And then the other mid-depth lures, we already talked about crankbaits, but we talked about shallow ones. Let's talk about deep ones. My favorite crankbait ever made, and I was never a big crankbait fisherman. Shallow crankbaits, yes, I could catch fish on that. Deeper ones, never. This one will run about 8 or 10 feet, and it's a Nishine. I'm going to forget the name again. Chippewa, sorry to Hiroshi. Nishine Chippewa DD, and it's got this blade on it, and this blade on it here is not just for design, not to make it different. It actually hits these hooks, and as it's going back and forth and hitting the hook back there, it'll actually change the direction of the bait. So the bait will be going, and then it'll dart left or right? And often that's what will trigger a strike. So like I said, I've been fishing this in 8, 10 feet of water. I've never caught so many fish on a deep crankbait, like ever. So crankbaits are a great way, mid-depth crankbaits with the bigger bills like that. Mid-depth crankbaits, a great way to search for fish and locate fish. Those treble hook, so you'll use those on your medium action rod. You don't want to use braid on a crankbait because those hooks, those treble hooks, sometimes you don't get them, you might just get one in them. So if you're using braid, you're likely going to rip it out of its mouth. So treble hooks, a jerk bait or a crankbait like this, it's a game of give and go when you're fighting the fish. So you don't want to put too much force on it. So you use a softer rod and you don't use a braided line. Braided line has no stretch. So like I said, you might rip the hook right out of its mouth. So you're going to want to use mono or fluorocarbon for your deep diving crankbaits. So yeah, that's pretty much a roundup of mid-sized baits. Mid-level, sorry, not mid-size, but mid-depth baits. Great way to cover water. I don't think I forgot anything. Nope, that's all good. So thanks for watching again. Next one's going to be up very soon, and it is going to be on fishing on the bottom, slowly. All these mid-sized depths, those are very good for finding fish. But when you really find the spot on the spot, and you really got to slow down, that's when you're going to use bottom level baits. So next is going to be drop shots, Ned rigs, things like that, easy to catch fish. Again, if you have any questions, please put them in the bottom. If there's any lures you want me to talk about, I'm more than happy to. I will be filming on the water this summer, so I will be showing you some of these lures actually on the water, how to use them. So please subscribe, give us a like, and we'll keep it going. Thanks for watching.